Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the HR risks and opportunities you can't avoid in 2024. A very warm welcome to you all. So by way of introduction into this webinar, we are going to be covering some of the major issues that we often get asked about by our clients. And at the moment, top of mind for people will be what are the risks and opportunities to look out for this year in terms of people management, what's happening on the landscape, and what are the trends, if you like, that business owners and managers should be thinking about as they start the new year, think about budgets and the like. So I'm going to talk you through those, and more importantly, I'm going to talk a bit about how best to deal with those risks so that you can put yourself as a manager or as a business owner into a position where you've got the best possible chance of making sure that you've got success in the year ahead, because there are quite a number of things that will potentially trip you over if you're not aware of them. So just to introduce myself, my name is David Hudson. I am the Managing Director of the HR Department Clapham, which I founded some 5 years ago now. I have an extensive amount of experience, from HR experience through to leadership experience, operating at all levels, and was delighted to start the business to really focus on helping much smaller businesses and charities to get through the often nightmare, landmine-filled sort of environment that HR can be. So delighted to have today also joining us some of our clients who are very welcome and happy to answer questions as we go. And so on that basis, just to get us into the zone, what I'm interested to hear from you is, what people risks are you most concerned about this year? What people risks are you most concerned about this year? So if you could turn to the chat function in Zoom and just simply pop in a letter or a comment to show what it is that you're worrying about most this year. So I'll give you a second to do that. Health and well-being. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cost of living, absolutely, yeah. Don't be shy, by the way. Thanks, Darren. Yeah, impact of cost of living. Yes, good, Roxy, absolutely. Talent development and talent drainage is an issue for sure. Good. Okay, interesting. Yes. Yes, Barbara, you're absolutely right. They are actually, as Barbara says in the chat, all of those things to a greater or lesser extent, depending on where you are, will be impacting your view of what the risks might be this year. And actually, it will be no surprise that the list that I've shared there with you are actually all of the things that we hear on a fairly regular basis. And I'll touch on some of those as we work through the session. Just to remind you, please do use the chat function to ask questions or share comments. There's many varied businesses on the webinar, so if you've got things that have worked well for you, then do drop them in, because many people here are doing some really fantastic things. I know from working with them as clients. If there's things you want to talk about after, let me know, but it's very informal. There's no right or wrong answer. Please don't be shy, and feel free to participate as much as you can. And there will be a chance at the end of this to go through questions. Okay, good. So the the rest of this presentation is based on a mix of feedback that we've had from our own clients. And as I mentioned, we have somewhere near 70 clients across West London. So this is based on what they tell us. It's also based on the way we constantly scan the landscape. So we will be looking at things on a macro level, if you like, looking at what the press is saying, what's happening in the economy. And I've distilled down here to what we know to be the 7 main priorities for HR in 2024. This has also been informed by a fairly informative piece of work that's done by Gartner every year, which is their top 5 priorities for HR leaders. And they similarly, which is helpful, have suggested that globally, the main priorities for us as people managers or business owners is first and foremost actually to look at leader development, organizational culture, HR technology, which is featuring heavily. And I haven't touched on that too much here because it's maybe more of a kind of a growing piece with corporate change management and career management. And interestingly, there's this emergence of this concept of internal mobility. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. From the last slide, what we have seen, and again, none of this will be of any surprise to us, but if we were asked to list what are the actual factors that are impacting people management, businesses, people themselves, then it will first and foremost be rising inflation. Obviously, we are spending more, getting less almost. Turbulence in an unsettled world. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that this year we're likely to see 2 major elections. So the UK election is likely to happen, although it's not been confirmed. And then there's the elections in America. And all of that we know is causing some uncertainty. And if you look at, for example, money markets, some of that means that there's sometimes some fluctuation in how that operates. So all in, actually, it's a very turbulent time for people. Turbulent, I guess, from a people management perspective, because people don't like to feel unsettled. You know, people like to feel certainty, because with certainty they feel security, and with security then they start to build out and find more happiness and contentment. But as we know, that unfortunately is in short supply, and it's no surprise that these priorities and the risks attached to them are what's creating a lot of uncertainty. So these are the top priorities for 2024, and these are the things that you will want to be thinking about how you're going to tackle, because if you like, these are the things that are going to move the needle forward more impactfully, so that you can get the most out of your people, and importantly, so that you retain your people, because underneath all of this, you'll want to be thinking about how can I best retain the people I've got and the talent, so that my business itself isn't majorly disrupted by everything else that's going on in the world. So let's turn our attention first to talent development and succession. A quick straw poll, put a yes into the chat function if recruitment for you at the moment is a little bit of a nightmare. So is recruitment for you a bit of a nightmare at the moment? Yes, ish, yeah. Fab Bella, yeah. Roxy, absolutely, yeah. 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 Great. I mean, you will know, and certainly we do. If there was one thing I had to say was front of mind for our clients beyond the sort of daily operational needs, it is recruitment. And we are coming across more and more businesses with their heads in their hands, wondering how to hell do they actually deal with the fact that they just don't have access to the talent they need to grow the business. And even more simply in retail, and we have retail clients who are struggling even just to find people to cover shifts. So it is a huge problem. And there are varying reasons, there are varying reasons for that. the danger here is to get too caught up in what the reasons are, and to think and really the way forward we find is to think more creatively about how do we go out and find the people that we need. And there's no two ways about it. The search for talent is about becoming much more creative, and what I'm seeing is some really good activity in our clients where people are, for example, thinking about, do they need one full-timer, or could they go out and find two part-timers? Do they need someone to do 20 hours when actually the role itself only needs to be 5 hours? Can they go into particular Facebook groups like Mums at Home, or Dads at Home, or anything of that ilk that gets them to people maybe that if you were using the traditional approach, such as an Indeed or an advert, you just wouldn't find those people. So my big steer to you here in terms of recruitment is first and foremost to think creatively, and to think about, is what you need actually what you need? Because you'd be surprised sometimes how you can get to what you need in a different way. It's often been the case that the best way sometimes to generate talent is to build your talent from within. So one of the things you'll want to be thinking about is, how do I use the people I've got and get them ready to move into the next big roles? So looking at your own internal market is key. And I mentioned earlier that one of the things that's coming through more and more is this new concept of internal mobility. And it's this idea that people are more open to, I think, more wanting to have careers that are almost like portfolio careers, where they move around to try different roles, or they take different routes to get to their final destination. So I guess in really simple speak, internal mobility for you might be looking at the people you've got and thinking about, do they have transferable skills that might be used in other parts of the business, that mean that you can plug a hole where maybe what you thought initially was that you'd have to go outside and find that talent. And you would be surprised, again, go out and talk to your people. You'll be surprised sometimes at the willingness of people to go and try other things. And it can be quite a motivating opportunity for people if they're curious. And for example, I work with a particular client, and they have an individual that was working in healthcare directly frontline, and has now gone off and is doing a stint in project management. So you can see there that the transferable skills being that individual has a high sense of customer service, high sense of prioritization, and is perfect for that project role. So think about your people and how you might be able to move them around. And what we're seeing more, I guess, generationally, as I said, is that people are more willing to move around because people are far more interested in, or what we're starting to see, build these portfolio careers. So talent and development definitely is top of mind for people. It's not something that happens on its own. Again, if I give you some practical insight, it's something that needs to be sat and talked about as a leadership group. There needs to be a plan, because if you're not looking after your talent, quite honestly, someone else is really going to kind of swoop in and do that. And with the market as it is at the moment, this is something you really want to make sure you are focused on. Because there is a lot of opportunity out there for people, and we're seeing moving for much less maybe than they were previously. So whilst the salaries have started to deflate a bit, certainly people are still attracted by training opportunities, career progression, sexy brands even. So don't sit on your laurels here, because other people will soon come in and take your talent if you're not looking after them. The next challenge and opportunity sits around the employee experience. And what we know is that there continues to be, if you like, friction between the employee-employer relationship. And what do I mean by that? There's a whole piece going on at the moment that we're seeing where people are starting to become quite fatigued by change. And you may reflect on your own experience of where you're working, that whilst change is fun, it can be quite wearing, and sometimes people just need to be able to sit into a position and get into a routine, all kind of part of that psychological safety piece that I mentioned earlier. And that's not happening. So change fatigue is a real issue at the moment. And within that, what we're seeing is that there's a little bit of friction in the employer-employee relationship, where people are just starting to feel a bit burned out, not particularly happy. And it's leading also, what we're seeing practically, to a noticeable increase in areas such as grievances and actually in tribunal claims. So you will want to think about, what experience do I want my employees to have? I can't change, the macro impacts on the business, but what I can do is try to make sure that the experience my people are having is the best that it can be under the circumstances that I'm operating by. That I guess then leads into this whole concept of people first. So the trend, if you like, is that we're moving away from this one size fits all view of everyone has the same benefits, everyone has the same holidays, to a much more refined approach where what people are starting to want is more recognition that they as individuals may need different things. So what do I mean by that? What we're seeing is that there's much more emphasis in areas such as enhanced maternity pay, enhanced paternity pay, as a way of keeping talent and employees, and helping them through a period where actually pay isn't compulsory, full pay is not compulsory. And that, in the environment that we're in, where we've just talked about cost of living, it can be crippling for people. There's some other things coming through you will have seen in the press. So a people first approach points to things like greater awareness in areas such as menopause. So it's being able to identify, I guess, in the employee life cycle, so when they start, when maybe they experience the start of a family, when maybe they experience bereavement, when maybe they experience menopause, the policies you have and the approach that you take demonstrates that you are thinking about them as an individual, rather than whitewashing everything with one set of policies that are pretty academic. So my challenge to you there, the opportunity is to look across your workforce, think about the culture that you have, and just maybe think about, are what we're offering our people aligned to what our people actually need. Secondly is hybrid working, and I'm sure it'll be a fascinating debate to open up between us around people's view on hybrid working. I dare I say, almost it seems employers love it or hate it. I don't quite get sometimes that people feel there's any middle ground. But what we know for absolute certainty is that people are starting to see hybrid working as the norm. And certainly what I see now more and more when we are recruiting is that the requirement to be able to work away from the main place of work is to people are given. It's not even now a negotiating point. People will just be expecting it. So you will want to continue to look at hybrid working, but as I'll talk about in a bit, there is a bit of a friction between hybrid working and culture, and that's starting to creep into conversations we're having with clients around how that's tackled. So I will come on to that. I guess the point to finish on here with employee experience is that employees are looking for meaning. What we're starting to see is that because of the way that the dynamics worked with flexible working, for example, and hybrid working, because the boundaries are arguably much more blurred than they were where people worked from 9 to 5 and went home, the workplace is being seen as something that people seem to want to draw more meaning out of, and is because of the way it's started to integrate itself into the whole life picture. We're starting to see a need from people who want to see the workplace as something that gives them a sense of purpose. So I guess there's a lot to think about there. If you look at the trends, my counsel to you is to take a step back. I guess look at your team, look at your company, and just take the opportunity to think about what do I want this experience to be for people? What do I want people to say about me when they're sitting having their Sunday lunch or they're in the pub on a Friday night? And then look at how you are operating to see whether the two things are well aligned. If we think about the challenges people are experiencing with recruitment, one of the knock-on effects to that is that there's a lot of activity around with business leaders that we're doing around how is my organization properly set up. I talked a little bit earlier about change fatigue. As I said, it is an issue. One of the articles that I read about this last week, for example, said that there's a staggering 42% of employees that have said in a recent survey that if change continued in their organization, they would just leave because they're tired by it. So with any change process, you've got to make sure it's properly managed. But most importantly, my counsel is to think about whether right now change is needed or whether it's change for change's sake, because it's almost become a bit, I think, of a pastime for companies to make change without really maybe kicking the tires on whether the change is good, not just for the company, but for the people involved. There's no coming away from the fact, though, that with the squeeze of finances, and the difficulties people are experiencing, that structures themselves are becoming much more agile. We are doing a lot more work than I think we have done ever really around redundancies, but redundancies as part of structure change, and companies are looking to be much more leaner. And so you might want to be thinking about that. The downside, obviously, is redundancies. The upside with agile structures is that it gives people an opportunity maybe to move around and do more. So whereas you might have had one person in 5 departments, you might have 3 departments and 5 people, and they can move around those departments. So don't be afraid to take a step back, look at your structure, think about how maybe you might be able to improve it, and most importantly, is it fit for what it is you see in the future? Because what we also see sometimes is people are quite wedded to quite hierarchical structures, leader, manager, employee, and that really isn't always the best way to operate. So take the opportunity to think about how you're set up. And what it should allow for you in terms of agile structure is that you can move around it freely, but also that it's aligned to what you're trying to deliver. Just a quick pause for a second. Do please again drop into any comments that you have in the chat function. I will leave time at the end, as I said, for questions. So I'm going to move on then to culture, and culture is a big is a big issue for companies at the moment, mainly because of hybrid working. Culture, is one of those things that is fairly intangible, but and I think in reality, companies often struggle to move from this is who we say we are, this is our vision, this is what we want to be, to people feeling it and being able to align to it and seeing sincerity in that view within the workplace. And hybrid working really has made that actually more difficult. So culture is something always we should keep a watch on. But if you've got hybrid workers, what you want to be doing right now is thinking about how that culture is showing itself in the organization. Is it where you want it to be? Is it morphing into something different? Dare I say, controversially, is it dying a bit of a death because you've got a lot of hybrid workers? You don't do inductions. There's nothing about culture anywhere or values. And just take an opportunity just to check in so that the culture is where you need it to be. And the way to do that, as I've just sort of mentioned, is to make sure you're covering those questions in induction. You should be able to ask any employee, what's your view of the culture? And that employee should be able to articulate that to you because they understand what your cultural values are. but you must work intentionally with culture. It doesn't just happen on its own. It needs nurturing and loving and looking after. One of the upsides but challenges with culture also that we're seeing is business leaders are asking us questions about how do we maintain culture when we're trying to grow and grow rapidly, which is brilliant. And it's really, I think, in my experience with culture, about just sticking to your knitting around making sure that the messages are clear, it's positioned in the right places. So the induction process, in the performance management process, in the exit process, maybe it's aligned to things like performance reviews. Some organizations align it to cultural alignment to pay. You can't overdo it with culture, but don't do too much with it because it can confuse people. So it's a great area, culture. And if you want to talk that through, by all means, let's do that. Let's have a coffee and talk that through, because I certainly love the culture piece. So moving on next then, again, it'll be no surprise that health and well-being has absolutely been top of the agenda. To share, if you like, some of our own experience in this space, we are definitely seeing a rise in absences due to health and well-being, mainly due to mental health and well-being. We do, I think, see often quite a correlation between that and hybrid working, for example. That is also, we're also seeing a bit of a challenge, I think, with health and well-being, slightly indirectly. But I think what's impacting is that managers are not sure in this space around how to deal with health and well-being and how to deal with an employee that presents that they are maybe having a challenging time with their mental health. So the way to deal with that, first and foremost, is to make sure you've got the right plans in place and the right policies and support structure, so that if an employee says that they are challenged in terms of health and well-being, you're able to respond appropriately. And having a HR team or a HR contact or someone like us to hand will also be part of that support network. Like anything, as we know in life with our own friends and family, the way to deal with health and well-being is to make sure that you intervene early. So where you are seeing employees that are maybe withdrawing more than usual, or are they are presenting more absences, more regular absences, then that will be warning signs that you will want to maybe start to talk to the employee about. Sometimes people aren't keen to share what will feel very, very sensitive information with managers. So sometimes you might just have to land the right questions in the right way to give employees the space to open up. I guess where that's interesting, again, looking at some research that, as I did last week, a staggering 60% of employees talk about feeling overstressed in their day-to-day work. 60%. So if you think about your own organization and the number of people in it, in real terms, that's going to be quite a lot of people. And you also want to be tackling it early, because it really can have quite an impact on a business. It can slow it down. It can have all sorts of unfortunate but indirect consequences when you have employees that are not operating at full par. The other interesting point to make is that the Office of National Statistics has told us that a staggering 2.5 million people are out just in any one time on long-term absence. And that is something that we, again, are seeing much more of a rise of. Interesting, again, just from some practical experience we're having at the moment, long-term absence really has started to vary more than it did just as we came out of COVID, where it was tending to be more mental health related. Sadly, what we are seeing is more cases of physical health related long-term absence that will be for more serious conditions such as cancer and some of those very, very unfortunate conditions people are having to deal with. So long-term absence is tricky. And what you will want to do, just to get on the front foot right now, is to look at how are your policies positioned around key questions employers will have, such as, do I get extra pay? Do I just get statutory pay? And also having a process to follow so that you can ultimately support that employee back to work. So one of the things that never really comes off the list is the need to build skills to equip managers and leaders. It's interesting that what I think really has never massively changed, but it's shown itself as it came out of the pandemic, is that we put people in to manage our people, but yet we don't give them training to do it, which has always struck me as a little bit strange, because you'd put a finance person in to run your finance team who was trained in finance. So yeah, as you can probably tell, I've always been slightly confused about that. It's definitely the case. It really genuinely is for us that there's often quite a correlation between where there are employee relations issues, or when clients first come to us, things that are not right, that where there's a correlation with that and the level of capability of the people that manage people. Now that might have a bit of a bite to it, but it is actually the facts. And I think I say that in fairness to those people, because if we are not giving people the skills to manage through very difficult situations at the moment, then how can we expect them to do that? And so one of the things that you will want to think about at the moment is, are my managers trained to deal with our people? Do they have the right level of skills? Do they have the tools available to them that means that they can deal with some of the things that I've just talked about previously? Just to overlay that, what we also know from some of the research that goes on in the market is that undertrained managers, or managers that are not able to deal with situations, are only causing an erosion of the relationship between the employee and the employer generally, if you like, because employees that are not being dealt with in the right way will understandably will only feel less happy, if you like. So the other startling statistic that I found last week was that only 1 in 2 employees say that their managers treat them with empathy and fairness. So if we sort of take that as half the workforce, again, something to think about, that potentially half your people are only confident that they're being treated with empathy and fairness, which would really be a bit of a cause for concern. So the whole piece now, and generally, and this will feed into the point I've made about recruitment, is it's much more now about having managers that have the right people skills to deal with issues. The whole idea here being that as long as they can act empathetically, they can listen, they've got good questioning skills, then the technical component of people management, so what does the law say about this and why does that happen, is of lesser importance. People want to be dealt with like people, and therefore managers need to be able to be people, if that all makes sense. So definitely what we've seen is this shift more into training managers in their own interpersonal skills as a way to better increase the level of people management in the organization. So I'm coming towards the end, but just a plug again, do please use the chat function if you want to ask questions or make comments. You are very welcome to do so. So the final piece is equality, diversity, and inclusion, and this is a fascinating area. As we know, it's often a well publicized area, but one I think that is almost a bit like culture. Lots talked about it, but actually when it gets down to it, what are organizations actually doing? One of the real standouts, if you look at what is it that is attracting people to organizations, what's definitely moved up the checklist for people is clear evidence that an organization is committed to diversity, equality, and inclusion. And also, second to that, that organizations are really into the social, geographical, environmental piece. So where does that organization sit in terms of its system around it? So where is it in terms of green initiatives? Where is it in terms of local community support? And I call it out because actually we are definitely seeing that in practical terms. I am seeing more questions being asked at all levels when we're recruiting around what are people's policies on diversity. You know, how are organisations giving back into the community? So something maybe to think about there. What people are wise to now, and given the various events of the last 5 or 6 years, is that simply talking about it is not good enough. People just don't see that as cutting it. So whitewashing diversity, equality, and inclusion just by saying we've got a policy is, as I said, just simply not good enough. What people don't want, I think, and again, if I may be so candid, people don't want bring your cultural foods to the office day, or I don't know, bring your pets, or, you know, people are way beyond that. What people want to see essentially is that as employers, we are absolutely embracing the diversity and brilliance of the different people that we have, and that in itself ultimately lands into a place where there is this whole sense of equality and inclusion. So we really have, I think, moved along from equality, into diversity, but actually where it is at the moment is inclusion. So how do we make sure we treat people the same and that those people feel that their needs are being met? And that's what you'll be wanting to think about in your DE&I policies. Cultural awareness and, you know, all sorts of other awareness initiatives are very good to do, you know, do bring people together. So don't stop doing that, but don't pay lip service to this, because I think people are much more wiser to that, as I said. Okay, so where does that all come together? So there's a lot there to think about. There's, as I said to you when we started, some tricky areas that could really trip you up if you are not careful. What you really want to do now is to go away and look at the things that will protect you. So your contracts of employment, how is that positioned to deal with things like hybrid working, for example? Your policies, so how are they positioned to make sure that you are setting out what's expected, and also, as I said to you, thinking more broadly about family friendly or key life event policies such as menopause support or bereavement support. Training, again, you've heard me talk about training. If we're not training our people to do what we need them to do, then we shouldn't really be expecting them to do the jobs that they're doing, frankly. So have a think about training and how that's being delivered, and that can simply be making sure that you are maybe letting people shadow. It doesn't mean we have to send people off for courses for weeks on weeks. Where is the management team in all of this? So thinking about, do you have a plan? What is the plan? What do you want to be? You know, some of those thought-provoking questions that I called out up the front. And also a question is this an opportunity to consolidate all of that and think about what's the culture? You know, are we hitting the markers we wanted with culture? If we went and talked to our newest person and asked them what's the culture of the organization, would they know? Does the culture really foster inclusivity, retention, talent development, and all of those things? Because it is that intangible sense of what the organization is that will really speak to people in terms of whether ultimately they will want to stay and develop in that, or or go. Just a bit of a heads up for what's coming, what we see as future trends. I guess to summarize this slide, for me, it's absolutely going to be about organizations that will win here are going to be the ones that are finding the way to help people feel like they are being dealt with as individuals. So this idea, if you like, of one size fits all, I think is, has had its day. And so just have a think, and I'm not suggesting by the way, that I've even got the answers to this, or that it's an easy sort of direction of travel. But we do, I think, just have to be aware that people are much clearer about what their own needs are, what they want from the employment relationship, what they want from work, how that fits into their life, and therefore are, I think, becoming much more demanding about how that's shaped so that it meets their needs, rather than actually, gone are the days where it was just all basically, this is what you're getting and this is how it's going to be delivered and you're going to like it approach from employers. There's no doubt that development is top of mind for employees. If I think about people that have moved around, where my clients have lost talent, it's often been a factor that the people the talent is moving to are offering development opportunities. And also, as people, if we're not developing, we don't feel like we're growing, and if we're not growing, we are going to start to look beyond where we are. So development is a piece that you will want to think about, and is just going to be an ever growing factor for how people view work. And as I've said, flexible working, which is here to stay, but has its challenges. And think carefully about the points that I've mentioned around culture. So how does all of these things meld into things like culture, performance management, managing health and well-being? Because even if people are working away from the office, we'll never not be responsible for them. So don't think that out of sight is out of mind, because that is a potentially dangerous view to take. I will send the slides to you, but I've tried to, there's a lot there, and deliberately so. I've tried to be quite thought-provoking. What you would want to do now is to go away and think about what they want to see you as. What are your view of the main risks? So I've talked a lot broadly about what the issues are out there, but what's your view? And if this whole last hour has just helped you consolidate, okay, I think I've got an issue with recruitment, I need to do some more training, culture maybe needs to be looked at, then brilliant, you're in the right place. And to be totally frank, you're thinking a lot further ahead than many organizations are getting the chance to at the moment. So don't complicate it. Think about what are your risks and how are you going to mitigate them. Don't pick 20, pick the top 2 or 3, and then consolidate those into your people plan. So at least you know the direction of travel that you're going to take for the next 12 months. Don't be frightened to ask yourself the challenging questions. And if you as leaders or managers don't have the chance to do that with people internally, then that's certainly space that we fill almost every day, if you like. We ask challenging questions to our clients, and we are asked challenging questions, and often will be a safe space for that. So don't be frightened to do that, because it's out of that often that creativity and progress can come. And then ultimately make sure you've got the right documentations in place and the right HR advice. I guess leading nicely on to a shameless plug, you will probably know that we do all of those things and we do them very well. I'm pleased to say that we continue to score 100% in our satisfaction surveys, and we can offer you support in all of the areas that I have talked about, even if it's just to grab a coffee and talk them through. Those of you that know me will know well that I like nothing more than chewing the fat on these things and hopefully helping you along in the process. We do run one-to-ones, so that's certainly you're welcome to drop in and we can do that. And then finally, to say that we will be running our next webinar on the 20th of March, which I will email out to you. And this one's quite important. You may know or may not know that on the 1st of April, employment law changes. And so in this space, it's really important that you are clear around what your new obligations may be. And I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about some of the other pertinent changes on the horizon. So changes in the sexual harassment reforms, a really interesting area. And I can tell you that certainly in the last 6 months, I've seen a definite increase based on the work we're doing with our clients on challenges in this space. So this is an area that you will want to definitely front foot with. Calculating holiday pay was a horrible area. No one likes it. It seems to have changed every week last year, but I think we've settled, and where we've settled is in actually quite a good place on holiday pay. But you do need to understand that employment status. So when are contractors not contractors? Sounds like a Christmas cracker joke, but it's an actual interesting area to think about. And finally, tribunal cases that might affect your business. So that's all on the 20th of March, and you are very welcome to join us then. As always, they are free. So I just rushed through that because I wanted to leave some time to answer any questions. So please feel more than free, no obligation, but feel more than free to drop in any questions you've got. I am recording the webinar and we'll send you a copy of that so that you can share it with the leadership team and other people. So I'm going to stop talking. You'll be pleased to hear. Give you a moment to ask questions, and if you don't have questions, thank you very much for joining. It's been a real delight to have you here, and thanks for the great turnout too. It's good. Thanks, Darian. Thanks, Catherine. How do you communicate a flexible approach to staff whilst having overarching policies? Super question there from Roxy. What you will want to do is you really almost want to start with your big picture view. So keeping it away from policies. So an example might be that the company's position is that it will allow that it supports flexible working, and that in principle that may be that that's a day a week or 2 days a week, and then sink into the policies to help provide guardrails of how people work within that. So the short answer there, Roxy, is communicate your intent so people understand that the big picture is that you are pro that, and then use the policies to act as your guardrails to help people understand how you expect them to operate within that. Thanks to Bella. Thanks, Bridget. Yes, lovely. Please do definitely email. Would love to speak. Thanks, Roxy. Thank you, Sandra. Okay. Well, do email me as I've said, please, and happy to chat. Otherwise, thank you very much to you all for attending. Really appreciate the time, and hope to see you soon, if not soon, on the 20th of March for the employment law webinar. Thanks a lot.